Hey guys, Saf here with another Raid Shadow Legends video, and in today's video we're going to be looking at this Path of Spring event that has just dropped. It is a Heroes Path event. So if you've never done a Heroes Path event before, and this is the first time you've seen it, a Heroes Path event is basically an event of two of the other types of events you see in the game. So it could be training and dungeon divers, artifact enhancement and dungeon divers, summon rush and dungeon divers. Normally it's always with dungeon divers, but they have done a couple of things in the past. Now in this time they've replaced the summon rush we would normally get on a weekend with this Heroes Path. So we have got down the bottom here, which my head is currently covering, you can see it says get artifacts and accessories, which is effectively dungeon divers, and then summon champions. Now each Heroes Path is themed differently. In this one we are collecting eggs because obviously it's Easter, I guess, or beyond Easter. I'm not really sure what's going on here, but hey, we're collecting eggs for the rabbit that has just gone live with most people who have just got that fusion. Now the key thing to remember with Heroes Path is you don't get the same amount of points as you would normally get with other events. Typically a summon rush, we all know by now, Sacred Shards is the way to go, but actually for the Heroes Path, Void Shards tend to be a little bit more valuable because you get more overall points from the Void Shards based on the quantity you can acquire than, say, sort of Sacred Shards. We'll see that in the math when I take a look at the breakdown. You can actually see how Void Shards pay off a little bit more in terms of the amount you have to invest. Ancient Shards remain pretty poor, so you are looking at a Void and a Sacred Shard if you kind of want to do it via Shards. And then, of course, you get Dungeon Diver points for getting artifacts. We have got Mythical Rows in here now, so you get some points for a Mythical Row. That generally translates into similar rates to Dungeon Divers. It's not that much. What you tend to find with these Hero Paths events is there's always a preferred route they want you to go down. Either it's one of them and the other one is pretty poor. So, for example, in this one, you really need to be summoning shards because the Dungeon Divers events will always be pretty poor. When we do the training event, normally training is dominant. When it's artifact enhancement is dominant. It's much easier to get to. And the other thing with the Heroes Path, which I actually quite like, I think is a good thing about this event, you have the flexibility to pick what you want at what point requirements. It's very complicated. It looks very, very difficult to understand. So I'm going to break it down in a very simple way. There are two paths you really need to take. We're going to be looking at 4 specifically, but there are 2 in total here. So you have a left and a right path. That gets you event keys. If you want the rabbit, you need to have completed at least one of these left or right hand side paths. Fully left or fully right. Now I would argue that the fully left is cheaper, but the fully right has better rewards. Because I think a 5-star chicken is better than an XP barrel, a 6-star legendary chaos ore is obviously better than a 6-star epic chaos ore, but you do pay a premium for those slightly better rewards. So you need to go down one of the left-hand sides, and then you need to get this one brew here. Doesn't really matter which one you go, and then you need to go the tier 2 soulstone, unlock one side of the path. It doesn't matter, you don't need both, you'll need one. Unlock that with the event key and then come down here, pick up one of these rewards and then pick up the rabbit soul. This is what is unique about this event. It has a 5-star perfect stall for the new fusion, which means you get a 5-star blessing, which to some extent is strong, but it's something that potentially might be too expensive. We'll have a look at really is it worth going for the soul after I've done the math. But that is path 1. That's if you care about the soul. Now, if you don't care about the soul, you don't need to go down these outside paths at all because you don't really care about the event key. Now, you might choose to do it for the epic books, but generally epic books are much more accessible in terms they get loaded into more events. You get them from the clan boss, you get them from Doom Tower normal. They're much more accessible than, say, something like a legendary book or tier 3 soulstone. I would say there are 2 paths remaining after this one path to get the soul. You want either 1 or 2 legendary books, or you want the tier 3 soulstone down here, which is actually, it's not a bad payoff considering how hard it is to acquire one of these eternal soulstones. They don't come around that often, although the frequency is picking up slightly, but they're not easy to get. You know, you're going to be summoning substantial amounts of tier 1s to summon substantial amount of tier 2s. I think you need to summon like, was it 30 tier 2s? And just to get 1 tier 1, you need 50. To get 1 tier 2, you need 50 tier 1s. It's a hell of a lot of soulstones if you do it that route. So in order to get that, you ignore both left and right side, and then you just kind of pick which way you want to go. They're kind of identical, really. One's more gem and chicken focus. One's more gem and experience focused, one is more core hammers and silver. I would argue probably the gems are just more valuable here to get your legendary book. I would not consider the feast very valuable for 40,000. I don't think it's much easier to go and farm like 5-star chickens in campaign for a feast, like the 40,000. I'm ignoring the feast as a path here. So you've got two options, or three options really. You go down the left-hand path and then go down the middle for the cheapest way to get the rabbit fusion. You can go to the right-hand path if you prefer those rewards. You need to get one event key to get the rabbit fusion. If you don't care about the rabbit soul here, then you just go down the middle, sort of 1.1 and 2.1 paths. Get one of these sides, then you can get the legendary book. And actually, I think the legendary book is a good trade-off. So let's go have a look at the math of this event. I've put it all into the spreadsheets like I normally do. Let's have a look what you are going to need to do to get all of these events done. So as I said, I have mapped this out into sort of 4 kind of pointed paths here. I've got 1.1, which is basically the first reward, and then the furthest left. We've got 1.2, which is the middle left. We've got then the bonus paths in the middle, and then on the right, we've got 2.1 and 2.2. I've basically created 4 paths for you. There's a path to get the cheapest route to the Razelvarg soul. There is a 1 legendary book, 2 legendary books, and then a path to the eternal soul, the cheapest way to get that. And those kind of translate into the following. The left-hand path is about 23,000 to get the event key. The right-hand side is 26,000. So the cheapest path to get to the soul is to go down the left route. And then you can choose whether you want the tier 3 soul coins or whether you want the tier 2 essence. It doesn't particularly matter. They're the same points. That's up to you. And then it'll cost you a total of 96,000 points to get the soul. It's very expensive. However, if you just want 1 legendary book, then it is about 18,000. I think the left path is about 500 more points, but it's about 18,000 points for 1 legendary book. If you want both legendary books, it's about 36,500. If you then want a path to the Eternal Soulstone, you have to take the right-hand path. So this is kind of like 1 legendary book plus Eternal Soulstone, not both legendary books. That would be, another 18,000 on top of that 48,000. Those are the 4 paths that I'm going to be assessing here. I've mapped it all in. The total amount of points for this path is 241,000. It's a very expensive heroes path. It's bigger than the other ones normally. I think if I look back at the Clover draft, that one was around about 120,000 points. And that also had an Eternal Soulstone. The Eternal Soulstone is the same price. So this Razelvarg sort of requirement that they've added is basically all the excess points, right? It's basically another 87,000. But it is a very, very expensive heroes path, especially for 4 days. So let's have a look at the summons math here. So generally you get 4,500 for a sacred shard. You get 1,100 for a void shard, 180 for an ancient, and then you get around about 9 for a mystery shard, which means per 10 pull, you're getting 90 per mystery, per 10 mysteries, 1,800 per ancients, and 11,000 per voids. Now, if we map this out here, you can basically see that if you want to get the Razelvarg fusion, you're going to have to invest either 21 sacreds or 87 voids. You can quite clearly see what I'm trying to say here about the void shard versus sacred shard versus ancient shard trade-off. Ancients are very expensive. 533, it's a lot. Ancients do not pay you to do this, as is the case in a normal summon rush. I just wanted to do some quick math here just to show what I mean about those void shards. If we take the usual reward for summon rush, which is 500, 120, and 20 for the void, for the sacred, void, and ancient, and then we work out how much you get on the actual egg roll here, you can see that voids gain slightly more points per shard than the other 2 shards. Now, it's not significantly huge. It just means that if you're going to do it, voids are the most efficient. So that's how much you need for the Razelvarg. What about the legendary books? Well, 4 sacred shards will get you a legendary book or 16 void shards. That's a pretty good trade-off, I would say. That's not bad. 16 void shards for a legendary book. That's pretty good. 33 for 2 legendary books. And then if you really want that Eternal Soulstone, you're looking at 44 ancients and 11 sacreds. And if you want to do the whole path, if that's what you want to do, then it's 54 sacreds, 220 voids, or 1,342 ancients. It is obscene amounts of summons. So what about the dungeon divers? Well, I've mapped out here the different rates, and I've pulled in my individual reward returns for the those dungeons that we get, the odds of you getting different types of artifacts. So we know that the odds of getting a 6-star mythical is about 1.59% on 10 hard, 3.38% on 10 hard for a 5-star mythical, and these odds kind of adjust and change here. But the crux of it here is you just got to look at this bottom table down here to know what we're doing. Basically, at 10 hard, you're going to get an average 34.6 coins per run, which works out at around about 1.73 coins per energy. 25 is 1.64, 24 is 1.81, 20 is 1.95, and then 16 is 1.97. So pretty much 16 or 20 is the most efficient divers, which we know to be the case for normal Dungeon Divers events anyway. So let's have a look how this actually works out in terms of efficiency for the Dungeon Divers. I've mapped them out here. This is kind of like a sheet that I will put up on Google Sheets because it has a nifty little calculator here to say, well, if I put in 40 ancients, how does it offset the kind of coins I've got here? I've got 44,000. So you can use this for your own kind of assessment so you know where you are. In essence, Dungeon Divers is pretty bad for these events. If I want to get one legendary book from Dungeon Divers, we're talking somewhere in the region of 9 to 10,000 energy to get that one legendary book. We're talking around about 654 stage 16 runs or 576. I would say stage 20 is the way to go because you get 5 and 6 star gear. 2, you actually need far less runs, and it's not that significant between energy for 16 and 20. Yes, it's slightly more energy, but it's only like 100. It's like barely a refill. Whereas the jump between 24, 25 and 10 hard is quite a lot. We're talking an extra 1,000 energy investment, even though you'd have to do less runs. If you want 2 legendary books, then you're talking double, near enough. So 1,100 runs, pretty much. If you want to get the Razelvarg exclusively from Dungeon Divers, the Soul, you are talking 3,074 stage 20 dungeon runs, or the equivalent of 49,184 energy. It is a huge investment. You cannot go into this thinking you can do Dungeon Divers to get the rabbit. It won't work. Don't waste your energy. It will not work. You need to go into it with, I'm going to summon shards and then I'll offset with whatever I can on the Dungeon Divers. You can see actually in terms of like a 6,500 Dungeon Divers points, I've lifted it now on my assessments because that's generally what it is, 6,500. We can tell roughly how many event points we get from the per run. We get about 13.57 points at 10 hard, and then on most efficient we get 12.16 here per run. But what it works out is actually stage 20 is only about 8% more than a typical Dungeon Divers. So what I mean by that is to get the legendary book versus a typical Dungeon Divers, how much more resources am I going to have to commit? You're committed about 8% more than you would commit for a Dungeon Divers. But obviously a Dungeon Divers never has a legendary book, so that's a very good trade-off in my opinion. So how would I play this event? I would play this event with, if you haven't got the shards, you don't want to summon it, go for the legendary book, because 18,000 for a legendary book is actually very achievable. There's a ×3 speed going on in Dragon right now. It's a pretty good event to run if you're in the mid game or even looking for more speed gear. There are loads of champion training events. There's lots of different things happening. So there is still things to run events on, but go for the legendary book, because I think actually a few shards you might decide to pull. Maybe you decide to pull 10 shards, 10 voids or something to try and get a Jorgid. Maybe you pull 1 or 2 sacreds here or there. That will mitigate you down, and you only need to run about half of this run here. You're probably looking at about 3,000 to 4,000 energy, and 3,000 to 4,000 energy for a legendary book is a very good trade-off. So what I just wanted to quickly do is have an assessment of, is the 5-star soul worth it for the Razelvarg fusion? Now, if you've got the champion, then obviously he is something you're probably looking at seeing what you can do with him. I'm going to be building a clan boss team with him, and actually having something like a Phantom Touch is very valuable for him because he hits a lot of times, he goes a lot of turns. Normally, you'll always get him in a 3-1 because he's going so fast. I don't think 5-star is that valuable in that setting. It's not like it's going to be that difference, because yes, you're going to get, say for example, you choose to do Phantom Touch. That's a typical thing you would pick probably for the clan boss if you have got anyone there. You could do Brimstone if you want to, but generally, like, you can put that on anyone else. You can also do Brimstone if you want, but I'm just going to look at Phantom Touch here for a second and go, okay, so if we are rank 1 soul, which you can pick up for 20 essence in the market when it comes around and rotates, well, you have a 15% chance to activate, but it's on per attack. So what that actually means is if you predominantly use his A1, as is the case in the team that I'm building, then you actually have a 40% near enough chance of activating Phantom Touch every time he does A1. Now, that does rise to almost guaranteed at rank 5, almost. And obviously, the other AoEs will gain 50%, a lot more. Like, they'll gain 60% more chance. So the AoEs really matter. If you use the AoEs, then it's much bigger. But I'm not so, like, I would really love to have the 5-star for the extra stats. But I'm not necessarily in the same boat thinking the 5-star is make or break for him, because I still think he can activate a lot of a 1-star blessing on his triple hit A1. This would be the same case for Brimstone. Brimstone applies on a per attack basis, not per skill basis. So if you hit multiple times, then a 1-star soul for Brimstone has a much higher chance of landing. So that is something to take into account, that he's not necessarily requiring the 5-star. Now, obviously, having a blessing will give you a lot more stats. So if we just look at that Phantom Touch here, you would get 500 attack, 25% crit damage. You would get a lot more bonus stats. Other blessings you could potentially use for him, would be great for an Intimidating Presence aura that would give you 15% strength and 20% weaken if you wanted to use him in any sort of setting. Sometimes the weakening of an enemy's defense aura is very valuable in some places like Doom Tower. Other options as well is you could potentially go for something like a Cruelty that would give you 15%. You could go for something like a Life Harvest if you wanted to use him in Arena. It would give him a lot of rotational turns, because you generally build him with a lot of speed, even if you want to do damage, because he builds his damage on speed quite a lot. So you could go that route. You could go the Brimstone route as well, but I think there are potentially better options. But it would give you a protected. You still need accuracy to land that Brimstone until rank 6, but at rank 5 it would be a protected. You get the orange border back, or the yellow border back. So there you go, guys. That is the path. In my personal opinion, I've just pulled a lot for Warlord, so I've used all my Void Shards. I don't really have many Sacred Shards, so I'm on the boat of, it looks very expensive to get that 5-star soul. I would really love to have that 5-star soul, but it would require an awful amount of investment of something I don't have and I'm not necessarily willing to do. So if I do anything, it will probably to try and either get this tier 3 Soulstone, or to try and get down and get one of these legendary books. But even the tier 3 Soulstone looks quite an expense. You know, it looks to be somewhere in the region of, to get the Eternal Soulstone, we're looking at 44 Voids, 11 Sacred Shards, so that's quite an expense as well. Let me know in the comments below, guys, what your plan is with this Hero's Path. Are you going for that Rabbit Soul, or are you going for another component? I will make sure the Google Sheet is linked in this description for this particular math assessment, and we will have an article on the website that will also summarize all this information. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next video.